Okay. Well, good morning and welcome to the June 20th, 2025 meeting of the New York City Campaign Finance Board. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from our May 30th meeting. I move their approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is my report or comments. Election day is just 4 days away now. Early voting in this election continues through this upcoming Sunday. In today's meeting, the board will be voting on its final round of pre-primary public funds payments for the 2025 elections, enforcement actions against two committees from the 2021 election cycle, and a Rule 709 petition from a mayoral campaign. I will now turn it over to the first Deputy Executive Director of the CFB, Amanda Melillo, for her opening remarks. Paul Ryan is unable to attend today's meeting. Amanda?
Thank you, Chair Schaefer. With just a few days to go before the primary, and with today being our last public funds payment, I want to take a moment to extend sincere gratitude to all the staff members who have gotten us to this point in the election calendar. Staff across the agency have assisted campaigns, reviewed matching claims to ensure candidates get paid public funds, and consulted on novel campaign finance policy questions. Staff have also tirelessly educated the public on this election, the matching funds program, and ranked choice voting. To all of our colleagues who don't directly work in elections, if you've noticed more stress and intensity lately, thank you for bearing with us and ensuring that the agency's staff continue to be supported so that we can execute on our mission and mandates. I hope everyone takes a minute to catch their breath next week, because we will immediately turn to doing this all over again for the general election. I also want to wish a happy Pride Month to our colleagues in the LGBTQIA+ community, as well as their friends, family, and allies. As a reminder, early voting runs through Sunday, and the primary election is Tuesday, June 24th. So I encourage everyone to get out and vote. Don't forget there are races on your ballot this election that utilize ranked choice voting, which allow voters to rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. To find your poll site, practice ranking, or for more information on the last few days of voting, you can visit nycvotes.org. Thank you, and back to you, Chair Schaefer.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the announcement of campaigns in compliance. There's one campaign that has qualified for this honor, if you will, from the 2021 election cycle for City Council District Number 1, Jenny Lowe. Next on our agenda is our vote on the 2025 public funds payment determinations. So I will now introduce a motion to approve public funds payments for the regular 2025 city elections to the following candidates in the following amounts. For mayor, Adrian Adams, $476,201. Michael Blake, $2,096,907. Andrew Cuomo, $467,694. Brad Lander, $655,123. Zohran Mamdani, $352,354. Zelnor Myrie, $273,345. Scott Stringer, $475,863. Whitney Tilson, $235,580. For public advocate, Jennifer Rajkumar, $111,100. Chumani Williams, $113,986. For controller, Justin Brannon, $494,795. Mark Levine, $390,866. For Brooklyn Borough President, Kari Edwards, $76,046. Antonio Reynoso, $156,087. For Manhattan Borough President, Brad Hoylman Siegel, $137,232. Keith Powers, $172,097. Calvin Sun, $47,716. For Bronx Borough President, Vanessa Gibson, $135,519. Rafael Salamanca, $74,889. For City Council District 1, Jess Coleman, $10,133. Christopher Marte, $9,713. Eric Yu, $7,058. For City Council District 2, Sarah Bachu, $10,133. Harvey Epstein, $10,133. Andrea Gordillo, $10,133. Ali Ryan, $10,498. Anthony Weiner, $15,042. For City Council District 3, Eric Butcher, $153,004. Jacqueline Lara, $10,115. For City Council District 4, Vanessa Aronson, $10,133. Faith Bondi, $10,134. Virginia Maloney, $10,033. Benjamin Wetzler, $9,083. For City Council District 7, Sean Abreu, $8,541. Edafe Okporo, $10,124. For City Council District 8, Clarissa Alayeto, $13,262. Federico Colon, $54,280. Elsie Encarnacion, $10,133. Wilfredo Lopez, $24,670. Nicholas Reyes, $1,672. Raymond Santana, $88,160. For City Council District 10, Carmen De La Rosa, $2,533. For City Council District 11, Eric Dinowitz, $10,133. Danielle Herbert Guggenheim, $13,934. For City Council District 12, Kevin Riley, $6,483. For City Council District 13, Shirley Aldebol, $32,885. David Diaz, $4,066. Joel R. Rivera, $10,076. Jacqueline Torres, $3,444. For City Council District 14, Fernando Cabrera, $11,396. Brian Hodge Vasquez, $56,098. Tiarina Sanchez, $10,133. For City Council District 14, Antierson Ortiz, $35,141. Freddie Perez Jr., $13,160. Justin Sanchez, $10,133. Elvis Santana, $26,507. For City Council District 19, Alexander Caruso, $5,374. Benjamin Chu, $32,450. For City Council District 21, David Aiken, $14,048. Yana Enriquez, $38,018. Erica Montoya, $38,810. Chanel Thomas Henry, $11,786. For City Council District 25, Shekhar Krishnan, $10,133. Ricardo Pacheco, $5,125. For City Council District 25, Tyrell Hankerson, $10,656. Romeo Hitlal, $15,732. Latoya Legrand, $12,280. Japneet Singh, $10,133. Reuben Wills, $14,320. For District Council 30, Paul Pogozelski, $13,932. Dermot Smith, $10,325. Phil Wong, $28,574. For City Council District 33, Sabrina Gates, $59,302. Lincoln Wrestler, $10,608. For City Council District 35, Dion Ashman, $17,932. Crystal Hudson, $8,291. For City Council District 38, Alexa Aviles, $10,133. Ling Yi, $18,340. For City Council District 39, Shahana Hanif, $10,133. Maya Kornberg, $10,134. For City Council District 41, Dante Arnwine, $15,952. Bianca Cunningham, $72,912. Lawman Lynch, $19,187. Darlene Mealy, $11,690. For City Council District 46, Mercedes Narcisse, $10,134. Dimple Willibus, $14,374. For District Council 47, Dikran Barsamian, $10,166. Kayla Santasuoso, $10,133. George Sarantopoulos, $43,965. Fadir Usmanov, $50,836. For City Council District 48, Ari Kagan, $26,560. Ina Vernikoff, $22,700. For City Council District 49, Sarah Bloss, $7,090. Talay Brown, $5,152. Abu Diakate, $11,237. Camila Hanks, $8,145. For City Council District 51, John Buthorn, $6,062. And Frank Morano, $10,772. This motion includes the board's decision to deny public funds payments to other participating candidates who are ineligible at this time. Immediately following this meeting, the board will make public a list of those candidates and the reasons for their ineligibility, as well as any candidates who have declined public funds payments at this time. Candidates who have been denied payment today have a right to appeal that decision. In addition, there will be more opportunities for campaigns to establish eligibility for matching funds in the coming weeks and months. I will be recusing myself from the vote regarding Andrew Cuomo, but I will be participating in the vote regarding all other candidates. And so that is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. We have one campaign appearance in relation to penalty matters before us today, and that is the campaign of Shirley Paul. Is Shirley Paul present? Please take a seat over here, and our staff from the CFB will take a seat at the other table. Welcome, Ms. Paul. So the way we proceed is I will ask the staff of the CFB to briefly describe what the issue is before us. It's not an argument. It just is a description of what we have. I'll then turn the floor over to you for any remarks you wish to make. I'll give the CFB staff an opportunity to respond. There may be some questions from the board. We'll go back and forth until we're done. At which point we will go into deliberations, come back a little while later with our decision. Okay, good.
Good morning, Chair Schaefer, members of the board. Can everyone hear me okay? First Deputy Executive Director Valillo, Ms. Paul. My name is Isaac Kaplan. I'm an attorney for the CFB, and with me is Cindy Ledesma, a CFB auditor. Before the board is the matter of the Paul campaign in the 2021 election for City Council District 46. Ms. Paul was a participant in the program and received public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find that the campaign committed the following 2 violations: exceeding the expenditure limit and failing to respond to the initial document request and draft audit report. The campaign contests these recommended violations.
Thank you. Ms. Paul.
Morning. I have something to read. Sorry. Good morning, Chair and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. Also, good morning, Isaac and Cindy and the staff of CFB. I take full responsibility for the findings before you, both the late submission of the documentation and the fact that I exceeded the spending limit.
I ask you just to speak louder. Thank you.
As a first-time candidate, I was unfamiliar with many of the processes and requirements. I want to be clear, it was never my intention to violate the rules. The overage was not done knowingly or to gain an unfair advantage. I simply lacked the infrastructure, experience, and support that many established campaigns have. I was doing the best that I could under pressure, and I misjudged certain expenses that ultimately led to the violation. On top of that, I was managing a serious family matter involving my mother's health. And this, coupled with the realities of campaigning during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic, contributed to some of my delays in compliance. That said, I understand that none of these factors excuse the mistake, but I do believe they help explain how it happened. Since then, I've taken clear steps to correct course. I've consulted with professionals on compliance, put better tracking systems in place, and I've learned from this experience. I respectfully ask that the board consider the context and my good faith as a new grassroots candidate when assessing the penalties. Of $58,000 fine, a fine in excess of $58,000 would be devastating to someone like me and could discourage not just me, but others like me, people from underrepresented communities, from ever stepping up to run for office. I believe in the importance of this process, and I'm committed to full transparency and compliance moving forward. Thank you again for your time and consideration today.
Thank you. Any response from CFB?
Not at this time.
Any questions from the board?
Ms. Paul, is it still, as I understand it, during this process, you stated that somehow you were not aware of the document request in the draft audit report. Is that still your position?
Some of the documents the campaign was not aware of, in terms of, I did have a treasurer that there were just some issues with retrieving some of that information. So when I did get some of these requests, those that I was able to comply with, for example, the bank statements and things like that, I did turn around and comply with that. My position today is to be able to better explain some of what was happening around that time in hopes that the fines can be reduced, if I answered you.
Confused. When you say you provided information, did the campaign provide any information in response to the initial document request or the draft audit report?
So in response to the initial document request and the draft audit report, no. We don't consider bank statements or anything produced in a later disclosure statement to be responsive to the IDR for the DAR. So no, to answer your question, there was no response to either. The candidate did request, Ms. Paul did request 3 extensions of the deadline to respond to the initial document request, but no response was ever submitted.
Any other question?
I'm sorry,
Okay.
just to separate the two documents, the initial draft report, I did not get to that point until we were able to go through everything else. With respect to the some of the documentation that we're missing, there were items that were actually in CFB, but not properly placed and identified. So when we were able to go back, and Isaac is correct, they did give me a few extensions, we were able to place them in the right place. So part of this was just our limited understanding and where to put the proper documentation.
What obviously we'll consider, but the problem the board has is somebody accepts almost $170,000 of public funds. They have some responsibilities. And here, it's to some extent, you just ignored the draft audit report and the IDR and actually reported expenditures. Was you calculated the amounts based on interpretation of rules. We'll consider the argument, but those are some of the issues we have to consider.
I do understand. And member David, I will say that when some of the items in the documents that were missing, like during the time, not the draft audit report. When we did get the draft audit report, the campaign, some of the people that were on the campaign at that time did not understand what exactly they were responding to. So that was part of our delay. Other documentation, I do believe we had them. They just weren't necessarily in the right place. There were documents that were already in my C-SPAN document section. We were able to move them when we submitted that latest compliance package in January of this year.
But that was in response to the enforcement notice.
Sorry?
That was in response to the enforcement notice.
Correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your appearance.
That it?
Board, that's it.
Oh.
Do you want to make a concluding statement?
I do. Again, I know that the CFB staff has work to do, and as a candidate, I'm ultimately responsible, even if my treasurer or anyone else failed to do things. I think, we were not aware that we had exceeded our spending. We did raise the cap, and once I did that, we believed that we were in a good place and did all of our best efforts to zero out the account so that we could pay all of our vendors that we use, all of our staff that we use. So again, nothing was done to give an unfair advantage. It is a hard burden to overcome that ultimately, as you've said, that we didn't respond, but we did do our best. We did have issues even with gaining access for me to some of the banking documentation from Amalgamated because of how our account was set up. And then there was a breakdown in the relationship with the treasurer. So again, it's still ultimately me, but I do understand that you have to give a fine. I just want you to revisit what this fine might be. I've been a public servant all my life. I did this in betterment of my community. I didn't have necessarily the right supports because the campaign was such in a different place because of the pandemic. So I just want those things to be given due consideration also.
Can I ask a question before we close? Just because there's been a lot of focus on the documentation piece, but just the largest amount of the fine is about exceeding the limit,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
And you just sort of suggested was that you weren't aware that you were exceeding the limit. But the information that you submitted to the CFB showed that you were exceeding the limit.
Well,
So if you can just give a little bit more, apart from the documentation, lack of response, delay in response, just on the expenditures itself, because that's the core of the violation and is one of the most serious violations that you can have at the CFB. I'd like to hear from you a little bit about, you said you didn't intend to exceed the limit, but the filings that you made with the CFB in real time showed that you were exceeding the limit?
Thank you, Member Smalls. So the way that I understood it, I was raising some money. I got, once I maxed out, I was getting disbursements from CFB. So every time I received those disbursements and we had our bills due, folks to pay, we were doing that. You know, in the heat of the day-to-days of the campaign, I wasn't necessarily perhaps at one point during the campaign monitoring everything that was going out. We did have consultants. We had a consulting group that we used, and we later learned that we were required to do a mailing piece. We were able to work with them to reduce the amount that we could spend with them, and that took a big chunk out of our money because they wouldn't let us get out of that engagement without doing that. So that was some of the cost. In addition, because I was on the ground knocking on doors and you know, doing things, delivering food, helping neighbors during this pandemic in a race that was highly politicized, I spent most of my time outside and on the ground. Again, the treasurer's responsibility is ultimately mine, but as the invoices came in, we thought we were doing the right thing by closing out and paying. So, so I think that's my response with respect to your question.
Okay, I'm just going to do one follow-up. So of course, it's the right thing to pay vendors when they've done the work. But I guess my question is you gave an explanation about the mail vendor and the fact that there was a mail requirement that you didn't understand or weren't aware of. But what about the other expenses that you incurred, knowing that you now had that expense as well as your staff? You continued to accrue expenses for the campaign, which I presume is how you exceeded the limit.
Yes. So the consultant that we used that we had to do the mailing was literally within the last 4 weeks of the campaign. A few months before the primary, that's when we were able to get out on doors, and canvassing was our major thing. So we were doing these things simultaneously. So that big chunk of almost $40,000 to this consulting group for like a few mailings, by the time we saw that deficit and that in our balance sheets, coupled with the folks we had on the ground, probably, you know, realistically in hindsight now, should have been having like a daily check-in, you know, and should have said, okay, I understand what's happening in the world right now and how we're dealing with this campaign, but, you know, we'd have to find better balance. I think the biggest blow for us was having to complete this engagement with this contractor. And I didn't want to risk the suit, which they had somewhat threatened. So I think there was a lot of pressures between the campaign staff and personal things happening in life. And we just really kept thinking we were doing the right thing. And the fact that we had the money, you know, it's not like we were in a negative while we were doing these things. So I think, again, in hindsight, could we have done better? Yes. I think it's just the pressures of that time and some of the obligations that the campaign itself entered into that we had to comply with.
Thank you.
So you're a very sympathetic candidate, and we want to encourage candidates like you to run. The exact thing you said, I think, was I had no intention to gain an unfair advantage. It's our job to make sure that nobody gains an unfair advantage, intentional or not, so that we can encourage, you and other people like you to run and to run under circumstances that are fair to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the board will go into deliberations now, and we'll be back in a little while. Thank you. Okay, well, welcome back. The board has deliberated on the two matters that are before it relating to alleged violations, one of which had presentation today and the other of which we carried over from an earlier meeting of the board. So I will make the following motion that the board find the following violations and impose the following penalties. Shirley Paul, 2021 candidate for city council. One, exceeding the expenditure limit, $48,709. Two, failing to respond to the initial document request and draft audit report, $10,000 for a total of $58,709. Next, Kenya Handy Hilliard, a 2021 candidate for city council. One, exceeding the expenditure limit, $38,606. That is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstentions? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda.
You were going to say something.
Yes, thank you. I would like to say in connection with the Kenya Handy Hilliard penalty, that the board considered and decided not to allocate any portion of that penalty to the former treasurer, but did reduce the amount of the penalty in consideration of some of the arguments made by the campaign concerning relative responsibility. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is a Rule 709 petition filed by the campaign of Andrew Cuomo. This was a petition to challenge, at least in part, the amount that the board withheld in payments at its last meeting. Since there was not time to schedule a board meeting, these have to be decided very quickly. And since I was recused from that matter, I delegated to Richard Davis, our board member, the authority to decide that petition in the first instance. And the petition was granted to the extent of whatever amount it was that it was granted. And the issue before the board today is to whether to ratify that decision by board member Davis. Since I'm recused, though, we lost our quorum for this purpose, so I'm going to wait a minute.
Isn't 3 o'clock?
What's that?
Isn't 3?
Well, Richard can't vote because it's a review of his decision and I'm recused. So we're just going to wait for Greg to come back. We can just contemplate the last day of spring.
While we're waiting, well, let me wait till Greg. that way.
Yeah, I'm sure he went to the.
About that?
It's okay. We needed you because.
Oh, I apologize.
Because we're
Well, here I
ratifying
am.
his decision and I'm recused.
Apologize,
So,
everybody.
so for Greg's benefit, let me just tee this up again. The motion is to ratify the decision by Board Member Davis to grant the Rule 709 petition by the campaign of Andrew Cuomo challenging the withholding of a certain amount of the last payment to his campaign. And I'll ask somebody to make that motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second. And just to explain that 709 petition granting did not impact the finding of coordination. All it did was adjust the amount that was actually expended on the ads that we found to be coordinated based on information that was provided by the campaign.
Thank you. Thank you. The motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So I'm not voting and Rich is not voting. So the motion carries. Thank you very much. And finally, I will make our usual motion to go into executive session to discuss some matters that don't require any action. And we will adjourn directly from the executive session. That's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? The motion carries.